Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the IAAC lecture series. Welcome to our houses. Welcome to the house of Martin Rein-Cano as well from Germany, that he is our special guest today. Thank you, Martin, for being with us. I would just go ahead with a short introduction for the people that they are joining us in both our Zoom platform here, but also through the streaming of Facebook. It's great to have you as part of our lecture series. Martin Rein-Cano, for everybody. He's an architect, he's a landscape architect, he's a multi-scalar architect, let's say. He's founder of TOPOTEK 1, born in Argentina, but actually based and working in Germany for many years. He has founded TOPOTEK 1 in 1996, and as we all know, TOPOTEK 1 has been and continues to be an office that in a very multi-scalar and multidisciplinary way connects architecture with landscape. A series of projects from inflatables to buildings to parks to gardens and master plans are projects that Martin is leading together with his team from TOPOTEK 1. And he himself, he has studied art history in the past. So he has also a kind of an interesting background of being able to mix architecture with other disciplines as well as creative industries. He has been lecturing abroad about the work, and he has received with his office a series of prizes for the work that they are doing, including projects such as the House of Art in Gold Coast, Australia, or the amazing Superkilen Park, one of my favorites in Copenhagen, as well as for the UNESCO World Heritage Site, Abbey, Lorsch. So Martin will share with us today part of his work, as well as part of the strategies and the processes that they are working in their office. And would be interesting also that he shared with us some of the views of how our discipline or how projects should respond to a crisis such as the one that we're living today. I would also like to invite Willy Muller, Director of Urban Sciences Lab at IAAC, to have a short word about Martin, that they are close friends, the Argentinian group. Willy?
Thank you, Areti. Very shortly. Good evening, good morning. I don't know the place that you stay. Hi, all guys from IAAC. And I would like to especially thank you, Martin. Today, you can share your experience from Berlin, and you can tell us what TOPOTEK is, what TOPOTEK do, and what TOPOTEK think, and who you are, my friend. Yeah. Saludo también en español a los diferentes amigos y estudiantes latinoamericanos que sé que se van a conectar hoy, y poder compartir también este espacio en común y escuchar hoy a Martin Rein-Cano. Y si me permitís, un saludo para os nossos colegas brasileños que sé que están escuchando hoy también en esa conferencia online. Thank you very much. Thank you, Martin, again for coming, or for not coming. Maybe it's a better say. Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
All right. Can you hear me? I'm on online. All right. So yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the invitation. Trying to establish, let's say, a new culture of communication. Let's see what we lose and what we gain. I will do my best. I only have been done it once, so you're the second one. I'm experimenting on these new ways of showing my work. Yeah, thank you to you, Areti, for inviting me. Thank you for Willy to organize and for having me, and also for Marco for helping me with my computer. So yeah, so maybe the title of my lecture, and maybe we can go to the first slide. As you heard, I was born in Argentina. I live in Germany since I am 13 years old. And as a good Argentinian, obviously, I am also first generation Argentinian, having a Spanish-born mother and a Lithuanian Jewish father. So that both were not born in Argentina. So that's how much Argentinian I am, but this probably for everyone or for most of us. So, and I think every nation, and I was thinking, speaking to Spain, I don't know if Catalonia is part of it, but however, speaking of Spain, every country has this kind of saint, literature saint that, that is relevant, let's say, for the personality of a country, on purpose or not, that actually survive somehow. And I would say maybe for Spain is Cervantes, I might be wrong, and it probably creates also part of the, let's say, the surrealism and the lust for craziness, for serious craziness that is so strong in Spain. I think it's probably based very much in Cervantes. And our saint in Argentina, however, is Jorge Luis Borges, who I met when I was 12. By coincidence, I had to do a school work. And I remember my mother being a fan of him, and I had to do something about Argentinian literature for school. And I don't know how I managed, but I managed to get an appointment with him and have an interview. That was 1980 in Buenos Aires. So, however, as I said, being Argentinian is always being actually a traitor or someone without faith, without country, without religion, without roots, if you want. So that's no coincidence that Borges, and one of these main sentences that I rescue from his writing is the original is unfaithful to the translation. So something that we would actually normally see in total opposition. We are so fixed and in love with the original that we think that any change or associative translation is actually a depurification of the original. And however, Borges was saying the opposite. And I like this idea that in the end, we are in a senseless chain of associations in which we actually always get lost in translation and always in the end copy, and that there isn't actually such thing as an original. It's only the creation of the original has to do maybe with the fetish of it, but in the end it doesn't exist, and it doesn't also help in the process of being creative. So not being faithful, being creative is one of the essentials of being creative. So if we go to the next slide, the title of this lecture is also the title of a publication that we did when my office turned in some 3 years ago, I think, turned 20. So we did this big monography of the office, and the monography in the end is trying to somehow put all these infidelities together and to find, and still today, not necessarily for me, but I feel that it's always important and difficult to explain these differences, you know, because people always want to have clarity about the product you sell. And if the product you sell is not so clear, but is very diverse, is business-wise a bit of a problem, because it's easier to do PR around, I don't know, if you always do something red, or if you do all the time squares, or if you do whatever, all the time something round or whatever, it's easier. And I never, not out of conviction, but out of my own personality, that also has to do with the country I was born, but also with the rest of my story as an immigrant with different identities, etc. So that the idea of creating fidelities towards one thing for me never occurred and was never possible, because I also wasn't allowed into a certain extent, so that I had to find a place, let's say, on the edges of fidelities, of clarities. So we can go on with the slides. So this is as I said, this publication, and by the way, Creative Infidelities is also a title by a scholar that wrote about Borges. So that's also where we got the title from. And so what we try to do is to say, okay, if there isn't this kind of formal, there are some formal stories that obviously repeat. We also sometimes copy ourselves, but not too often, however. And so we were looking, let's say, for families or thinking families, let's say, of things. And that's how the book has been structured, so that we have different projects that actually create families. And these families define, let's say, certain strategies. And we had 10 of these families put together in the book, trying to explain, let's say, 10 main stories that have been developed in the last 10 years that we strategically follow. Next slides, please. Next one. And we always been kind of going, as it was mentioned, I wanted to be an artist, I think, in the beginning, and I was not brave enough, and I can't draw very well, so I thought I couldn't do it. And so, and then I went to study art history, and I think that, let's say, the artistic approach to, especially when it comes to the landscape architecture projects, for me is very, very relevant, as, let's say, the main tradition of landscape architecture, the strongest tradition of landscape architecture, in very difference to architecture, is not a bare necessity of protecting yourself from weather and other elements. The story of landscape architecture always was a one of a nice to have, let's say, one that was beyond bread, let's say, beyond the bare necessity. And so it got lost a little bit over the centuries, especially also because landscape architecture always tried to, let's say, join forces with architecture. And as architecture has been defined very much by functionalism since the modern movements of the 20s of the last century, the artistic got lost. But on the other side, there are barely functions when it comes to the landscape. You know, I mean, the functions are also very rare or not as declared and clear as they would be in a building. You know, there is no toilets and classrooms and whatever, and escape routes because there might be a fire or whatever you might have to think in a building. A landscape in the end is a sculpture, if you want, you know. And this strong connection, you also can see, you know, the English landscape gardens have been always called the picturesque, you know, the picture gardens in the end, because they were copies. And speaking also of the original in the translation or the original of the copy, like mentioned in the Borges quote, you know that the origins of the English landscape garden, of romantic garden all over Europe, been paintings by Claude Laurent and Nicolas Poussin. There were two French painters in the midst of the 18th century, and English aristocrats got so fascinated by these eclectic mixes of landscape elements and architectures that they asked gardeners, architects, to actually realize them in real. So the picture was there, actually the copy was there before the original. So the original that was actually the garden that is alive was done after the picture was done. So that in the end, the causality, the raw of causality was changed. And yeah, so we can go on. So these are just some projects in the book, just to show you how we try to actually put them together. Go on. Go on. I will talk about some of these projects later. Go on. And recently about so we've been doing when we published this book, we started already to do little experiments also towards buildings. We've been mainly working on landscape architecture, on open spaces. We did several installations, art-related escapades, if you want. And since 3 years now, we are also working with buildings. And that made actually the mix even more complicated. How do you get all these things now then together? No? How do you explain why a building is, you know, sometimes I have difficulties explaining what we do in terms of buildings because it seems so incredibly different to what do we do in terms of public space. So people are sometimes disappointed or even more lost. As I explained before, for my way of working, I need also this feeling lost myself to really develop, in my opinion, high levels of creativity. When I get too comfortable to what I do, I usually get bored and the stuff doesn't get interesting anymore. But obviously buildings is a different story than public spaces, than open spaces, than gardens, than parks, than squares, etc. You always can think of translating typologies. You always can think of a building as a landscape. You always can think of a landscape as a building. And these kind of exercises can be helpful. one thing I should mention, that 90% of the projects we do happen through competitions that usually also have a program, so that we are not acting completely free in thin air, let's say, or convince some client of doing something. That's something we never got accustomed to do. So we usually do competitions for the landscape as for the architecture. However, so in continuation of the story of the creative infidelities, we then started to create anthologies. So we have several anthologies in which we try to understand for ourselves and also for the general public and for our clients how the things we do actually work together. The next page. And so we gave them, let's say, a certain title, yeah, that creates a certain idea around what the issues are that we've been interested in working on these projects. Even though these projects might not look alike and don't seem related, they have, let's say, a related core, not only because of the authorship that lies within me, but also for, let's say, a certain way of thinking around projects that, however, can still create total different outcomes. So one of these several anthologies we created is called Resonance, for example. And the next picture. And this anthology about resonance has, for example, in this project in Lorsch, that used to be an Abbey. And the idea for this project, the Abbey was gone. It was destroyed by the troops of Napoleon in the 19th century. It's a little city south of Frankfurt. But this place, even having very, very little historical remains, has an incredible importance because it was one of the main transcriptoriums, writing abbeys of the Middle Ages. And half the Vatican library was written in this place, was copied in this place, let's say, as before printing. So that's the reason this place is World Heritage, even so being totally absent of any remainings. So what we did is actually to create this resonance of the past, kind of faking the remainings of the existence of this place before. So that's what I call resonance. That's the reason this project has to do for me with resonance. The next one, next picture, please. So this is the same project. Go on. And this project is the second competition that we won for buildings. It's a building in Kuwait. It's actually two buildings in Kuwait, as you can see on the right image, on the perspective. It's the headquarters of a foundation, the Kuwaiti Foundation for the Advancement of Science, and a conference center for the same institution. And here it was actually, the resonance we were looking here for was actually how to create, let's say, a modern building that still resonates, let's say, one of the key typological spaces of Arabic architecture, not only of Arabic architecture, but let's say of warm climatic architecture, that is the patio. So, but instead, let's say, of doing the patio as a perforation, a vertical perforation, we started to work on it on the facade. And also the idea of the facade, it's very enclosed, you know, that is more the Arabic story maybe, but something that you also will find in the Mediterranean, the idea of the wall and spaces that are very autistic somehow to the outside, and the openings are really valuable and special. So we combined these two issues, so we did very close boxes that actually have vertical patios. So, and this is for me another way of interpreting, let's say, a historical or cultural resonance that can be implemented in a new way, or can be copy-pasted in a new way. Next picture. The next slide. Yeah, so go. Yeah, one special thing of this building, it's that it has this kind of green space. Can we have one slide back, please? Sorry. That has this kind of empty floor, because a public space runs through a park that exists on site already. So we created, let's say, a resonance of the Arabic water garden, maybe, under the building. As shade in a climate like Kuwait is the most valuable, water and shade, let's say, is the most valuable stories you can have. Okay, next picture. Can we have the next slide, please? This is the second competition we won. for, no, that's the first. The second was the other one. That's the first one we won. That we are finally finalizing the design development right now. Is a concert hall in Nuremberg. And what is interesting about this project, you can see maybe in the side plan, might be a little bit small on your computers, but you see also in the image, there is a 1960s beautiful concert hall that is there, or is there as, and our concert hall was supposed to be not an extension, as this one is 3 times bigger than the existing one, but should be seen as in connection to the existing hall. And also here, the idea was not to, let's say, invent a new story or something that is even corrective, but let's say how to copy paste, how to create a reinterpretation of the 60s structure. So the 60s structure has a plinth. The plinth is 7 meters high, as you can see on the image, and this plinth has aluminum boxes. So we created the same plinth that is also 7 meters high in our concert hall, and also we placed a box on top of it so that we copy pasted, let's say, the DNA, but exchanged totally then the materialization, so that there is a kind of familiarity, but also an independence. And this is for me also what resonance can be about, you know? Because the resonance obviously always will sound different than the actual instrument. You know? Next picture, please. The next slide.
Martin, take into consideration that there is a slowly...
I'm sorry.
The internet connection.
No worries. I'm sorry, I'm impatient. Sorry for that. Yeah, go on. Next image, please. So, and so these are these anthologies in which you can see how maybe, and we have 10 or 11 of these anthologies. So resonance is one of them, in which I try to show, let's say, a certain direction in which we are capable of working. But there are others, and maybe some that are also rather more known for what we do, especially in the field of working with public spaces, that has to do with the working of graphics and colors. But again, this is for me not something that I committed to, but one of the things that I like to use in my, let's say, bigger palette of possibilities of strategies depending on the project. And let's say the birth project of this strategy was the roof of our first office. We're still in the same building since it's now 25 years. Next year it's 25 years, 24 years since we opened the office. So the office was on the right side, where these little roofs look out. And this black with white was our terrace. So when and the terrace was as big as the office. So each of the, no, actually the terrace was bigger. The terrace was around 100 square meters and the office itself was around 50. And as you can see in the back, it is very, very central. This is the Alexanderplatz. This is the center of Berlin, the former center of the East, but let's say the actual center of the United City. And in the very center, there is a television tower built by when the communists were ruling the country. And and one thing that I like to experiment had to do with another project that was ongoing those days for a parking space. And this parking space was supposed to be used, let's say, have a double use, so that it had drawings for parking, but also would have drawings for playing, because the cars wouldn't park there during the day. Most of the time people would go to work with their cars, so this parking lot was empty, and the idea was that the kids could use it for playing meanwhile the cars were gone. But also the idea that that, let's say, the denomination of a space for one single use wasn't allowed, so that people would have to negotiate, let's say, and say, okay, could you move your car because it's on top of our basketball field, you know? So the sense that there is no a right to occupy space, but there is a right to discuss about ownership and who is supposed to use the space. And so that's how I came across, let's say, this street graphics. And there is a big tradition, let's say, of sky related gardens, you know, of mirror pools that then also Corbusier and Niemeyer and other people used in the 50s and 60s, this idea that you can reflect heaven on earth, on these big pools, as part of a certain infinity that was important for this generation. So, however, the exercise here was, let's say, one was to transport a foreign syntax, a foreign language from the street to a rooftop, confusing, let's say, the communication and the information that this graphic might give. And on the other side, because of the mere scale of the graphic, to have the sense that when you're on the terrace, actually you're supposed to look above to heaven. The next slide, please. Okay, next one. Next one. So this is the parking lot I was mentioning, in which the elements, let's say the rules of two worlds were superimposed. And this maybe has to do with the ideas, you know, in places, I think contexts are very relevant. I think that's nothing new to say. And probably every architect would, maybe not every architect, but most of us would say that context is relevant. For me, definitely it is. I like the idea of reacting rather than inventing. So, and the idea of Northern Europe is an idea that works very much around order. So we love to separate things, you know, to create order, you usually have to separate things, no? And the idea of mixing is kind of not, for us, not as important as you would see that in Catholic Mediterranean cultures, maybe. So, and as maybe a bit of more order in certain cultures is required, up north, I would say a little bit of chaos is required not to get totally depressed. Yeah. And so the goal of us as planners is actually, instead of creating order as part of elevating the life of the users, is actually to create disorder to help people be happy or relaxed or less stressed, let's say. And in that case, instead of having one system, we create these two systems that actually create disorder, create chaos, and this chaos is actually what produces in the end communication and creates also somehow something like neighborhood, because then the kids again have to call and bring someone down and say, can you move your car because you're standing on top of our playground. Something that is very, very unusual in our circumstances here in Germany, as everything is everything has its place, you know. There isn't places of questioning whose they are. Yeah, I mean, in Berlin, it's not completely true. In Berlin, we have a lot of spaces, or used to have a lot of space like that. But in general, it's still, even so, Berlin is a bit exceptional. I would say the tendency of order is really important here. Okay, next one. So I also like to speak about the next one. Yeah, we can go on a little bit. I also like to speak about the aesthetics of conflict, that there is something positive about creating conflicts, and sometimes you actually have to develop conflicts or inject conflicts to a certain extent to create, let's say, places of quality. Next one. Next one. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. So this is a park in north of Berlin, in Schwerin. That's a city between here and Hamburg, with a castle and a beautiful lake. And there was a park, a historic park that was rebuilt, and an area next to it that was supposed to be connected to the historic park to create a green connection to other areas, the natural preservation area somewhere. So we built this bridge, let's say, as a cut between the historic areas and the new extensions. Go ahead. And these new extensions are not in any way spectacular, and wouldn't have been as spectacular as we were really asked to do something very traditional in this historic context, blah, blah, blah. But then the client came with a wish. They wanted a picnic space. And the problem was that every time we proposed a picnic area within our perimeter, someone was unhappy with it, or it was the nature preservation people because they said we don't want all the waste in this area, or it was the cultural preservation, the historic preservation people saying we don't want to have these elements in too close to the castle and also not too close to the historic part of the park, etc., etc. So in one of these discussions, someone came up and said, I mean, we can't have a picnic place, it seems, in this place. Can we go on with the pictures? So, and then this person say, go on. Yeah, you can go one more. Thank you. So, and someone in this group say, but then if we can put it anywhere, the only place that is left is actually the water. And I said, that's a great idea. We should do that, you know? And so misusing, let's say, the conflict that appeared in that group, because for me, let's say the aesthetic of conflict is also something that I experience a lot with my clients, that it's sometimes also good to fight with them, and out of fight, something really surprising things can come out. Sometimes obviously not, but sometimes you can get much more out of projects if you create this kind of conflictive situations rather than trying to evenize and harmonize everything. So what we find here is actually a simple confrontation of two issues that you wouldn't see together, that again create this kind of, for me, this aesthetic of conflict that create communication, because people start to talk to each other because of the surprise actually of having to have a picnic something, having to take your shoes off, etc. And a simple trick, but very efficient, in my opinion, to create this kind of shift of the common, or shift of things that we get too used to, you know. And these little shifts can actually be very can create, especially in our context. Again, I mean, I remember last time I was in Asturias doing a vacation, and I remember I had to get my son to the bus station, and immediately I sat down and an old lady started to talk to me, you know. In Spain, I think this kind of things happen. This is kind of the common. Here we tend to respect very much privacy of others, and we only talk, let's say, when there is dysfunctionality, when something doesn't work, when the train is not coming on time, or when, you know, when something happens that is not meant to be happening. So, and this is actually what we try to build in many cases, is to do things that are not supposed to be, also to create a more human interaction. Okay, next one. The next project is actually, we can flip through it. It's actually one that happened, we were invited to do a competition in, not a competition, an exhibition garden in China, in Xi'an. And you know, working in different cultures can be fun. And sometimes it's easy to relate to them. Many of the cultures are also familiar to each other. But some are also too foreign and too different to try to get, let's say, an idea around them. It's how it felt to me when we did this project, at least. So we started an association chain with the people in the office, and everyone was saying, on some point, someone said, actually, when I remember being a child, my mom told me that if I keep digging in the sandpit, I will end up in China. And so we love this idea, because then suddenly everyone in the group from different countries started to say the same story. So, and then the question was, where actually this hole that comes from everywhere around the world would end in China. So we said we should build, let's say, the counterpart of this digging hole coming from Europe. And actually Argentina, by the way, is the real, if you draw a straight line, Argentina would be the place where you need to dig if you want to end straight in China. All the other places are geographically not suited to do that. So, and then we installed, we did recordings of different places, and these recordings were installed in the hole to create a sound connection, an audio connection to these different places. And then there was another story to it. We did these posters selling the project as a prototype for tunneling the world as a giant project of the Chinese government that was then hanged as a poster. I don't know why they didn't tell us to take it away. It was too funny, probably, to be repressed. So, so it had like also different levels or different stories. But humor, I would say, is one of the things that I also like to sometimes, the sense that when you see something or experience something you start to smile. You know, when you take off your shoes, you get cold feet. You know, I don't know, when it's hot, and then it's a simple body experience that you can have. That as simple as it is, it's incredibly joyful. Okay, next one. Okay, next one. Next one. Next one. So this is the outcome. It's a parabolic hole, let's say, with a glass railing around it, so that you never can see the end of it. And yeah, next one. Next one. Next one. Next one. He wants to know what is in the hole. Next one. So, and then he misbehaved. He's being sent to Germany now through the hole. And so what is interesting, however, we can stop here for a second, is that also, let's say, again, the unfaithfulness of the interpretation or of the translation. No? We thought it's a little bit of a kinky, stupid, funny project. It suddenly developed into the main location for brides and grooms to take pictures in the city of Xi'an when they get married. So obviously not something that we had in mind, but I love this kind of accidents, or let's say also the unfaithfulness of the users that can come after the project can be incredibly interesting. Next one. Okay, so next project, this is a project in Australia. I think I'm speaking too much. Huh? If I start to bore you, you have to tell me. I don't know how much I can go through so many projects, but let's keep on going. You just tell me. So this is a project I did together with students in Australia. And it was interesting. Well, as you can see, none of them are actually Australians, but this is another issue. What is interesting, when they invited me to do a workshop with the University of Melbourne, they obviously been studying a little bit my work, and they kind of already created, let's say, a repertoire of things we should do when we go to the site. So we had colors for painting the site, and the professor who was who invited us, invited me, actually also had a drone. So, and the idea was how to create, let's say, a mapping of a site. How can we draw, and how drawings can be something that can be in any scale, let's say, and how can we approach sites? How can we sensibilize ourselves for sites, you know, and what is the value of existing elements? You know, there is a beauty in almost everything. And to find and to define it is sometimes something that needs to be done, creating a certain underlining or a certain framing or a certain reinterpretation, let's say, of a place. So, and this was the exercise, what this exercise was about. Next one. So we started to draw, let's say, personal lines. You can click through. We started to draw, let's say, every student would have to draw one personal line. And the idea was that he, like with this bush or whatever, or with that everyone would kind of react in a different way to what it would be finding. And what is interesting, as maybe with having to do lectures on the internet now, is that actually because of the drone, suddenly, actually, if you would look at the image from ground, the pictures we took from ground were actually not very interesting. But the cases, this professor would have a drone to document the work, made the work suddenly have a second value, you know? And as the internet, let's say, is a realm of itself, and this kind of things exist, let's say, not only on site, as the colors we used was chalk, so probably it disappeared already because of rain and wind and whatever. It still exists as a story, as an image, you know? And this also shows how, let's say, Google Earth, the idea that we can look at every place, not only from ground, but also from above, also creates, let's say, an aesthetic of its own. Next one. And also suddenly, let's say, something that was out of scale, suddenly because of the drone, actually suddenly on scale. It's a drawing that actually can be understood as a drawing, almost as a plan. You know? There's also a little movie. I don't know if it's going to work. Yeah, it seems to be working. Now you can see the scale. I'm the last one running. Okay. So, and this, this is a word that means short, make it shorter, it says here, kürzen. Yeah, sorry, that's a work thing, shouldn't be in there. So this is a Superkilen. This is probably our most famous project. And I think all the stories I told you before have also to do with this project. This project, let's say, has also different mothers and fathers, as it was a collaboration. Many projects we do are collaborations, by the way. And so that also this is a process that usually is not necessarily harmonic, but also can be, as everyone knows, also full of conflicts. And the question is, how can you, let's say, use this kind of conflicts also to create the best possible outcomes for projects? No, doesn't matter if it's a client or is someone working with you, for you, your partner, or whoever. The idea that things have to be harmonious, especially in the beginning of projects. You know, when you develop ideas, I think it's actually usually better to do them a little bit conflictive rather than too harmonic. However, this project has, as I said, different mothers and fathers, and also different stories and different concepts on top of each other. Let's say the main ones are related with immigration, as you might know. This neighborhood, Nebro, is 90% of the people living here were not born in Denmark and come from about 100 different ethnicities from around the world. So, and the competition brief was how to create a park that was supposed to integrate or to help or to catalyze the processes of this neighborhood. And the idea was actually to use one concept that I was talking about related with the English Landscape Park, that, you know, the English Landscape Parks, just to make it short, as you heard before, were motivated by images, by pictures. That's the reason we call it the picturesque. Yeah? And so it was copies from imaginatory landscapes, collaged landscapes. The other special thing of the English landscape gardens, the romantic gardens, is that none of the elements in them are actually English. We call it today the English Landscape Park, but actually nothing in them is English. Most of the plants utilized came from the colonies. It was also the age of discoveries around the world. So you might have heard of the Bounty of James Cook, bringing all these beautiful plants to England. And England has a very, very good weather to make all sorts of plants grow happily. So, and, but not only plants, also, let's say, a lot of quotations of architecture. So they would like copy temples from Greece or from Rome, or they would copy ruins from castles from other areas, etc. So the idea was that in the end, nothing in the garden was actually original, but everything was actually a bad copy. And so even though the whole park is actually not English, not originally made and developed out of the culture of this place, but let's say a mix, a collection, all of sorts of things that are foreign. Today we call it the English garden. So I was interested in how, let's say, the garden creates the possibility of transition, of translating, let's say, foreign into local. Yeah, something that is foreign can become national identity. The romantic garden, the English garden, is probably the most important export of in terms of space and of aesthetics. All the American suburbs are developed like that. You know, half the world is following this idea of the campus as the ideal landscape. So this is a very, very important, spatially also important story. However, one of the things applied to this project was the concept and strategies of the English landscape garden, in terms of saying that all the elements and all the trees and all the pavements and all the elements in this park are actually not Danish, but foreign. Just in difference to the English garden, most of the elements we applied here were chosen, partly were chosen by the people who live in this neighborhood, and are more or less, let's say, not Elysian, not like beautiful poetic elements, temples, etc., but objects of every day, such as advertisements and other billboards. But, and it's important, as for the Greek temple that was copied in England was copied with English sandstone, and usually also in a wrong scale, as the copies were made from some drawings that someone might have done on some trip going to Greece. So, so that in the end, these copies were also a little bit British, no? They were smaller, they were done with English sandstone, so that in the end they were foreign, somehow Greek, but also in the translation, also somehow local. And this idea I actually liked as an analogy to immigration. Immigration as a kind of a process of being in the same time local and foreign, and in the end also not having to decide really for which to go. And that was a little bit the idea that lies in this part. So this is one of the concepts, for me, maybe the most relevant one applied to this space. The other one, as I mentioned, we can go on, is the ideas that I was talking about, the ideas of, these are the 100 objects that they were placed in space. Next one, we can go on, okay. So we can stop, can we go one back, sorry. So this is an object that I really like a lot. So we have a big Islamic community here, of course, in the neighborhood. And you know, with all the conflicts that happen around the world with Islam and Muslims, created a lot of, well, a lot of conflicts that were not aesthetical, but real conflicts, so that we had difficulties how to confront these issues. So in looking for objects, one person actually being asked to provide an object from his country showed us this image, telling that his uncle actually owns this dental office in Sana'a, and that he actually provided him money to go to Denmark to study, etc. So that he's really proud of him, blah, blah, blah. So when we saw that, we thought that looks really cool. And next one. So that actually became one of the objects that we did in Superkilen. And what I like about this object, that it's like the Greek temple, it's somehow foreign, but also because of the make, because of the scale, it has this kind of Nordic coolness to it, you know, it has this kind of Scandinavic cleanness to it, you know, so in the end, it's both things, yeah. On the left side, on the same image, you also can see a barbecue place, you know, a parrilla that was proposed by myself. Also, I think it's important to provide, let's say, new programs to places. You know, we seem to think that the public space programs are ending when you do a bench and a playground and whatever. But if you think of this neighborhood, the necessity of using the space outside, not only for relaxing or sports, but also for picnic, being often big families with small apartments, was somehow relevant, and also created, again, conflicts that can be cool. You know, it's nice to see other people eating or making a barbecue. It smells nice, so you might be maybe less xenophobic if you see that. That's my hope. Next one. Yeah, this is from America, a donut sign, you know, and also from Spain. You might know the story of the, can we go one back, sorry, of the brandy. Now I forgot the name of the firm. Fuck, what is the kind? Someone of you.
Osborne.
So Osborne. So these guys used to have a brandy, a cognac, and used to use the bull as an advertisement. And because it must have been, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, the Catalans, but in general, there was a lot of criticism for bullfighting, so that this firm thought that using this animal as an advertisement element would kind of not be appropriate for the time being. The problem was that these bulls, obviously not being invented by this firm as part of a, let's say, Tauristic Spanish tradition, are older than the firm, and they also were misusing, let's say, this tradition to sell their product. However, they placed these bulls along the highways going down to the beaches of the Mediterranean. So when the Germans and the Dutch would see the bulls, they would know they are close to where they need to go swimming. And then they disappeared. And there was a lot of complaint why they took them away, because for them it was part of the landscape, even so it was advertisement. So it was identity. So the Spanish state, actually the Andalusian state, bought the rights for the bulls, and the bulls are still there, but without Osborne as part of the landscape. So that also the idea of the misuse of elements and the copy paste of elements through different phases, let's say, from being an element of a characteristic of a country, the bull, as an element of national pride and identity, to become a brand, to become a misuse for advertisement, to then be going back to be something in between. You know, it's a memory of a brandy and a memory of a country, and let's say land art object in the landscape. So, and this image is, the reason I like it is also because there is this car seller in the back of the picture. This one is real. They really sell cars, you know. There is no Osborne, and also we don't sell donuts in our park, but the cars are real, for now at least. You know, the French cars are not very good. So they might also disappear on some point. So this idea of, let's say, transitions, identity as a transitional story, it's something that I think, also when it comes to advertisement, because advertisement is relatively fast, it uses relatively clear images, but it also gets renewed relatively fast. So this idea that it might change and become, that things that are just a product become identity, and maybe the product disappear. You know, my son was actually telling me today that people say, let's Skype on Zoom. You know, I mean, Skype actually disappeared, but the word we use actually for Skyping, we use it, and we don't say Zooming yet. No, so this idea that there is a flow of how things join each other, and this flow for me, that's the reason I like this sentence by Borges so much. That in the end, it's actually not the original, it's not the translation that is unfaithful. It's actually the original that was already unfaithful. So there is not actually fidelity in anything, but let's say manipulation of flow into different into different directions. And in regard of this park, I think parks are also a good place for transitions as they grow and change with weather, with age, etc. They are more capable, let's say, to take a transition between, let's say, being foreign and becoming local, because this is also a natural process that happens earlier or later, you know, depending on the country and the place you are, might take longer or shorter, depending on yourself, obviously, as well. But the park seems to be, for me, a more suitable analogy. Okay, the next one. Okay, go on. So this is the red square. Go on. We can flip through now. This is an Iraqi swing. Go on. Okay, go on. So stop here. So this one is important in terms of the aesthetic of conflicts, because again, this is an immigrant neighborhood. There's a lot of violence, drugs, all the elements that we would expect in such a social deprived area. So instead of, let's say, forbidding violence, the question is, can you make violence actually something that can become, let's say, part of the solution, and can be violence also be framed in an aesthetic way, instead of being repressed and having to happen, let's say, in a dark corner somewhere, you know? And in that case, it was a Thai boxing club that is around the corner from the park. And with them, we have chosen this Thai boxing ring, so that suddenly, let's say, so violence becomes culture, violence becomes sport. You know, if you hit someone in the face on bare ground, it's a crime. You hit someone in the face 50 centimeters above ground with a string around it, it's something else. And maybe the approach to use another Argentinian background, as a good Argentinian, my mom is a psychologist, and so is the second wife of my father and 3 of my uncles, so that we are all very psychoanalyzed, as the whole country is. So, and one thing that you learn when you are framed by this profession is that actually psychoanalysis is often not really about solving your problem, but reframing it, let's say. Understanding that your problem might not be a problem, no? It's actually the process of creating an understanding of your problem. So the solving is not repressing or dissolving, and in that case, it's violence. So instead of resolving the violence, dissolving the violence, repressing it, you have to reframe it and to make it part of your character. So there's nothing better than crazy people that survive and create around their craziness, their character. And so it's for neighborhoods. Neighborhoods also have to actually create a character out of what they have. And in that case, it is a rather conflictive neighborhood, so that I'm happy that we could realize this object. Okay, next one. Next one, okay. Yeah. So some advertisement objects gone. There is also an app where you can read where the objects come from. Okay, go on. Go on. Go on. So this one is from Japan, something that is common in one place. So in Japan, all the playgrounds are octopuses. Yeah, and we love that. And so we brought it to Copenhagen as one of the foreign objects. But because it was on the black square, so we painted it black. Yeah. Next, there's someone wanting to raise a question. I'm okay if someone wants to make a question, so I can have a break.
I think, Martin, the best is that we can resume in 5 minutes and then we can have a conversation with everybody.
All right.
If that's okay with you.
Okay, then let's go on. I would like to show, okay, let's go through. Okay, go on, go on, go on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are different stories, but I think we should skip that. I would like to show you other stuff before we finish. Go on. Yeah, maybe here we could, the park had an incredible resonance, you know, and what I started to speak about in Melbourne, how projects also have nowadays not only, let's say, a real life, but also a second life, and how relevant this second life also can be for the identity of a place and also for the survival of a place, you know, especially if it's a, let's say, socially deprived area that doesn't maybe have a lobby to fight in the city for maintenance, for money, etc. And so it was very helpful for this park, and it gets much more maintenance money than many other places in Copenhagen because it got such a public attention, and also for the people who live there, you know, in an area where no one would visit. Suddenly, it's the 10th most visited site in Denmark, actually. So after they went to Tivoli and to other places, Superkilen became a kind of a tourist attraction. And also for people who live there, from being in an area where no one would like to be, suddenly they become an area that is interesting to visit. So also that's part of, let's say, making deprived people also proud of what they have. And also what they have, let's say, because it's also rather radical and also a little bit ugly, it doesn't create, let's say, the gentrification that you would otherwise expect. So because, let's say, the amount of violence is not yet reduced as much, so that there are not too many hipsters moving into the neighborhood. Next one. So, and then there's a lot of stories around it. By coincidence, when the iPhone 6 was launched some years ago, a teacher from around the corner took a picture and sent it in, and then Apple used it for advertisement. Go on. And so it was in many, oops, sorry, one bag. It was, yeah, it was used. This is in Potsdamer Platz here in Berlin, but it was used all around the world. Something I was also traveling and seeing it hanging somewhere, and it's being used for advertisement campaigns till today because it has this kind of image strength that is so relevant. So I think projects also need to have, let's say, this imaginatory, this picturesque, let's say, to also create images out of them that is as important as them being in reality very good as they often require. And I think that we as planners, not for every project, but for some projects, have to kind of design the resonance of the project as much as we do the project. Next one. Next one. So this is Audi. Can't remember what this advertisement is about. So this is the last project I'm showing to you, just to give you another hint of the architecture. That's a project we did a second prize for in Riyadh, capital of Saudi Arabia. It's a visitor center for a new big development in the center of Riyadh, a new park that is placed on a former airport. And so one of the ideas, you can flip through, I can explain the story meanwhile. So the idea was to create a building that actually somehow reminds us of the existence of it being an airport. And it was supposed to be the first building on site, being an exhibition building for what is going to happen in this place during the next 20, 30, 40 years. So the idea was to do kind of airplane piers that would contain these different programs that were required for this visitor center. What was interesting, you can flip through if you don't mind. What was interesting is that they also, even you would think it's a very hot place, they wanted to have greenhouses, but actually the greenhouses that are required in Saudi Arabia. So this is the object, as you can see. This is the, maybe we can go one back, sorry. So this is the site, how it looks today, in the center of Riyadh, former airport. And this is the site for the new visitor center. And the master plan for the whole park was won by Henning Larsen. The first prize of this project was won by Adage. You can try to Google it. It's very different to what we did. However, we did the sticks, and the sticks are like airplane bridges where you would enter an airplane and each of them would contain a story, a program. And what was interesting, however, I was trying to explain is all this that they required, they wanted to have greenhouses, but the greenhouses, in difference to our climate, usually contain plants that otherwise, because of the heat, wouldn't survive. Okay, so that you try to create greenhouse, like we have greenhouses with, let's say, exotic plants from hot areas. They create greenhouses actually to get plants from non-desertic places. Okay, go on. And they're mixed with the program. Okay, go on. Go on. Yeah, so these are the 5 sticks. No, how many is it? 4 with the different programs. Go on. And there was a little park around them. So that in the end, the topography of the park was also containing some of the programs, like an auditorium that we wouldn't get fitted into the sticks, but also was part of the structure holding these bridges, so that they wouldn't have, or they would have columns, but in some of the places they would be held by the hills. Okay, go on. And so that these sticks lie on top of each other, and partly they intercept each other, and so that you get all sorts of different circulation possibilities within these different sticks. Go on. Go on. So it's a kind of a little museum, if you want, visiting center. Yeah. Okay. So these are some sections. As you see, what we did is actually to open up the structures always to the north and to close them to the south, so that we created the necessary shade. Go on. Go on. It's too many slides. I'm sorry. This is the circulation schemes. So, and this is how the whole thing would have looked like. Yeah. So it was a kind of a flying carpet. Yeah. That and we were the only ones actually that did the greenhouses together with the program. The other participants actually did the greenhouses and did the program. Okay, for the visiting center. So what we did is to put these two things together, created this kind of strange connections. This is some elements of the garden design, of the park design. That's actually it. We can flip through the slides, but I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Digital clap. Thank you for your presentation. I was taking notes all the time because I think that it was super nice that through your lecture you managed to also explain some of the strategies and some of the lemmas that you are using in the office, reacting versus inventing, or the aesthetics of conflict, or how we can deal with objects as memory of places, identity as transitional places. reframing problems instead of repressing or dissolving some of my notes on your thoughts and the basis of your project. It's great to share it with us, and I know that there are some questions, so I will just open up into everybody that wants to directly address a question to Martin. I think Osmin wanted to have a question. Osmin.
Yeah, thanks, Areti. First of all, Martin, thanks for such a great lecture. It's always nice to see the work of a Latino in the architecture field. I'm also a Latino, not Argentina, but Guatemalan.
Thank you.
Don't worry. First of all, I would like to bring back 2 projects from your presentation. So at first you show these inflatable pink structures, like objects, displaying the park. Then during the presentation, you also show a floating picnic area, which is actually showing this small scale human water interaction. I would like to know if both objects or topics, the inflatable structures and the water human connection, can be proposed in a large scale project, let's say a city, and how can you imagine this possibility?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I don't know really. I mean, I think that almost every strategy probably can be applied to another scale or another task. But you know, to create infidelity, however, is also a lot of work. You know what I mean? It's not like magic that you can, like, in the moment that you have the translation in hand. I mean, you know, to cheat is a lot of work, you know, and a lot of creativity, let's say. You know? So cheating is actually more difficult than functioning. So that you probably could use these strategies for a city, but it would have to be more clear, or your question would have to be more clear for what kind of project, in which kind of context, etc., etc. And then one would have to judge if this kind of strategy can be then used. And also, the question is also, first one would have to analyze the strategy of this. I mean, one of the things that I think both of them have, both are playful and both are actually aesthetically valuable, let's say, from my point of view at least. You know, they have also 2 lives. They're kind of central elements in terms of body interaction, but they're also central elements when it comes to their visuality, let's say, to their strength in being an image, let's say. And I think good buildings, good cities should have these kind of experiences as well. I would say good building should be also a body experience as much as it is an aesthetic visual experience. So I think most of the architects are incapable to create sensual experiences for buildings. Usually buildings are nice to take a picture of, but there are very, very few of them are fun or interesting to use them with your body, you know? So that could be some answer. Sorry, I start now answering, but in the end, it would really depend also what you take out of the strategy, you know? Is it the shininess? Is it also the provocation? You know, is it, I don't know. You know, also you can say both projects, what is important to me when it comes to playgrounds, because the pink things were a playground, by the way, that they are also not only be used by children. You know, I remember when my kids were small, I hated to go with them to the playground. It was boring for me, you know, because all the play objects were made for them, you know, but I wanted to play with them and not just being there and taking care that they don't kill themselves, you know. So, and the idea of the inflatables is to create as a common experience. And I think also that's also an issue for cities or for building, to create, let's say, experiences for different groups, different ages, different social backgrounds that are equally interesting depending on your age or your social background, you know. Like the playground, you know, for a child, pink is maybe the most desirable color. For an adult, obviously pink is kinky, you know, so I don't know. And as an adult, you see maybe a sculpture, and as a kid, you just see a wonderland of playing. And so, and this kind of multiplicity, let's say, of possible experiences, I think are also important when it comes to good places. Yeah, and good places depend on good objects in them. So I think you could rescue a lot of things out of that. Sorry, I stop now.
Thank you, Osmin. And Martin, anybody else that wants to share a question or comments? Me, Martin, I had a question that I would like to share with you, and maybe this can warm up a discussion as well. And it is related with the identity of public space. As I told you in the beginning, the Superkilen project for me is a reference project of designing almost with the people instead of designing for them, right? And it becomes a kind of public space is the space where society meets, is a space where interaction is happening, and designing a public space is a huge challenge, because it needs to accommodate the different needs of the people, but also the different cultural backgrounds, and as well as provide the experiences, design objects that they become part of this enhancement of interaction. No? And then during these crisis moments, we have seen that public space has been muted. No, it has been actually paused. It has become a space of no man's land, and it has also raised issues of how public spaces should be redesigned or should be thought in a way that could be used by people that not only for enhancing interaction, but also for reassuring certain, health or distance. No, so it almost seems that we were meant to design for people to get apart instead of bring them together. So I just wanted to do this reflection in relation to public space and what are the challenges that you see for the future of the public space, not only in terms of designing it, but more than anything in terms of inhabiting it.
I think that the Corona story is a temporary story, and I believe, and of course, there are a lot of groups that are going to try to misuse it. They want everyone to work from home, so they don't need to rent offices anymore, and it's better, you can control better, load people better if you keep them on home than if you have them chatting to each other in the kitchen, and doing gossip on the way to the toilet. So that I hope that there will be a lot of misuse in a, let's say, I don't want to sound anti-capitalistic because I am not, but in a, let's say, turbo-capitalistic way, there will be a lot of very easy misuses of the Corona. And that has to do with control. It's easier to control people if they communicate more with their devices, because you know with whom they communicate, if they talk in the toilet, you don't know, if meanwhile we are talking, the CIA, the KGB, and the Spanish Secret Service, and the Catalan Secret Service are probably all joining us, so that all these things in the end will cause negative outcomes, so that I think that the fight goes on to create real common spaces where we can meet in a, let's say, body-to-body relationship, and also create closeness and not separation. I think that there always been reactions to diseases, etc., and obviously also good ones. I mean, without the cholera and other things, we wouldn't have good canalization systems in the cities, good sewage systems and cleaning water systems, etc. But if you see, for example, how devastating in Germany, for example, the effect of the Second World War on the development of cities have been, because people couldn't imagine, the experience of the war was so tremendous. If you would sit in a very dense city and you would have the bombs raining on top of you, you wouldn't have any place to escape. So all the developments happening after the war were incredibly spread, and they created a lot of separation, and a lot of, and more order than necessary, lonesomeness and the lack of neighborhoodness and the lack of problems, let's say, because everything is so well organized, then you never need your neighbor, and you never need your neighbor. It's a lonesome life, that you will have. So I think that, and I hope that we don't get too functionalistic around Corona, and that we should keep on fighting for encounters, to create good encounters places, buildings as much as cities. And the distant story is a momentary, as war are moment. You know, there are many places in war. We just don't know because we haven't had wars for a long time in Europe. But there are a lot of places that live in bad momentums. It's not that the whole life is just fun and going to the Costa Brava, you know. So we are just having a conflict, but that doesn't mean that we have to change our lives because we have a conflict or because we are sick ones. You know?
Is there anything that we can learn that could be translated into design principles for the future?
I don't know. I am a bit fed up with all this learning about what we can learn from Corona. Of course, you can grow out of crisis. Of course, you have to. I mean, what I think is good, I think, as I said before, there is always an aesthetic in conflicts. Even in wars, there is an aesthetic, you know. So the question for us as designer is, how can we create creativity out of this conflictive situation? And in my situations like that, I was also, and I think many of us been running around like crazies, you know. I mean, the velocity of life got kind of totally out of control. And I think there was a total lack of life quality that was going on there with too much escapism, you know, too many substitutes and things. So I think it's good to have, but you know, these conflicts we also have also personally. Everyone got divorced, was sick, had a loss or whatever. Maybe we are all human. So we all in life go through moments where we have to kind of hold on and say, come on, what is going on? Can I keep on going like that? Or is it right what I am doing, etc. So, and now it's a collective situation that happens to us. But it's part of being human. It's not new and it's not special, in my opinion. And shouldn't be done and shouldn't get too much, or we shouldn't take it too serious, let's say, to become the slaves of Zoom and of home working and home office and whatever. You know, we have to have the choice to, because it can be, as I said, I think it's going to be, you know, I was giving an interview the other day about the work environment changes to Corona. And I was saying, you know, I'm an employee. I have 70 people. I have 2 offices. We have an office in Zurich with 10 people and another one here in Berlin. For me, if this home office works, why should I hire a German person with a lot of work rights, you know? And you know, in Germany, you get paid if you are sick, you get paid if you, whatever, you get paid, whatever you do, you have a lot of rights, and it's good like that, you know? And lots of generations did fight for those rights, you know? But for me, if someone works from home, why don't I hire someone in India, you know? That maybe has a good education, but cost me much less, and I can get rid of him or of her in the process. So, and this is what is already going on. A lot of firms are outsourcing a lot of jobs into cheaper places with less rights than in many countries. So we have to be careful that the Corona is not being misused to fasten that process, taking away rights of employees in our countries. No? So I am really very, so I don't think all these things are better than before, to tell you the truth. I think that we were a bit crazy and that maybe we did travel too much, whatever, but I think it was better than thinking that home office is the solution of all the problems, because they would create a lot of unemployment, I think. And I don't like it. Sorry, long answer.
No, I want to say something. Probably I don't be sure I can to express that in my particular English. Okay, but I come back in your presentation, in the atmosphere of your presentation. Sometimes this comment is from Argentine to Argentine, yes. And because you express many times, you say something and you make many reference to the, I don't know, probably the most important Argentinian writer in the 20th century, like Jorge Luis Borges. And many times, some people in general, some people say, okay, that the category of this writer is like the boom of Latin American writers in the 21st century. Of course, Barcelona was the center of this special boom in the 70s, and that is a category, but having a special and particular difference, and I want to make reference to that. And I don't want to make enemies in this chat, because sometimes my friends from other countries in Latin America say, oh, okay, the new again the Argentinian ego come back, etc., etc. But happen a particular difference between writers. Why that this is? It's a format to express the contents, and the format to the Argentinian writer used was the stories, not the novels. And that is a particular and different, because Jorge Luis Borges built an enormous opera only with the stories, not with novels. And that is interesting because when I remember Cortázar, probably made the genius combination between stories and novels, construct the only one novel around the world with the stories, like an Arrayuela. And I want to come back in your presentation. Sometimes I see this kind of beautiful and amazing and nice stories in your presentation. Sometimes we know many architects around the world absolutely with the focus to construct, to build a novel with the personal work. But in your case, I see in your presentation very nice and very beautiful stories. And maybe, as Jorge Luis Borges said, maybe when you finish your work, a long time in front, maybe you recognize the expression of your face. Yeah, that is probably you remember this sentence from Jorge Luis Borges.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I don't know if have more questions, Areti.
I think, I think there is. Is there any other question to Martin? I see a question in the chat from Maria asking about the nature of the white lines in the Superkilen.
Yeah, this is, it has different stories. The black square, as we call it, was called the black square before, or black market actually, because it used to be one of the most important drug selling squares in Copenhagen, however. So that's the reason it was called the black market. It wasn't black before. So when we heard the story, speaking of stories, we made it black. The second thing, so that was the asphalt. The second thing was that we've been experimenting, and we will see also in other projects we've been doing, with the ideas of optical illusions, because this is also part of the English landscape gardens, or gardening, you know, has a lot to do with scale. You know, gardens like the bonsai always plays with scale. Meanwhile, let's say architecture always have to respect a human scale. Landscape often plays with, let's say, being irrelevant scale-wise, too small, too big, you know, doing giant things, or small trees as the bonsai, etc. So, and so the idea of optical illusion, because behind the black square there is this green part that is all ondulated, and the idea was that actually these lines would be kind of a drawing of height lines. You know, when you do a plan, you draw lines to define the heights, you know, in a topographical plan. And the idea was actually to play with the issue of something that is a reference, that is actually a drawing, that suddenly jumps from being a drawing into reality, you know, and plays with the idea that it might be misunderstood as topographical, and in reality, actually, they grow on top of a mountain. You know? So that was the idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more comments? Last comment or last question?
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure, Rani, go ahead.
Martin, first of all, thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
It was really fun to have a chance to understand your work a little bit more. And you gave us a lot to think about. But what I really enjoyed was actually the kind of humor and wit that you can see across your body of work. And I feel that's the most, that's the thing we can take out the most, and also its power. And I really liked understanding. I've seen Superkilen tons of times, but it was really fun taking that journey and seeing, why is it so special? And also understanding actually that the humor and wit, maybe for sure the community participation is something positive, but I think the humor and the wit that's embedded in that is actually what was the power to transform the place. that was the power to capture people's maybe wonder and imagination. I wanted to ask you, so I understood, I've always known TOPOTEK as actually a landscape firm, and I understand more recently you're doing more architecture. And I was wondering, yeah, I don't know, I was just wondering how you could see more of that humor and that wit that exists in your other projects. In those, because actually, I participated. Yeah, I know, but the reason I ask is because I feel there's a huge jump. So I actually worked on that competition, the one in Kuwait.
Okay.
So I'm very familiar with it. So it makes me laugh. I said, "Oh wow, you know, it was a great proposal." But when I see your other work, I see, wow, I wish it even translated into that project as well.
Yeah, but what I tried to say before, you know, this kind of disappointing is also part of the game as well. You know, it's part of allow yourself also not to become a slave of one strategy. And it is very different. It can be very different the ways you do things, you know. And also if you look at our homepage, our portfolio is really huge. And we've been doing also super serious stuff as much as very funny stuff. So, and believe me, every time I find a chance to do something stupid, I go for it, yeah. But it has to be the right context, the right project, the right content. And yeah, and maybe I am also not there yet. You know, it's also part of a learning process because I am I know a lot of things, but I didn't study architecture to start with, you know, and I am also learning a lot and architecture. What I was saying about the functionalism of architecture, it's also true, you know, you get lost also in organizing. I mean, when I see the competitions we do, we also won a school recently. We did 10 schools in Switzerland, yeah, and we won one. We spent half the time organizing the stupid rooms. You know, when we do a landscape architecture competition, we spend half the time, I don't know, doing something stupid. You know, dreaming, exactly. So it creates also a precondition that makes you more. That's the reason architects are also boring people, you know, because they spend their life organizing stupid spaces. But it is so incredibly relevant, you know. Organization of space is, you know, to do something that is highly functional but still hypersensual, you know. And it depends in which context. And you have, you know, as I said before, also Superkilen was a product of a competition, but the competition was asking for something like that. You know what I mean? I mean, it's also different. And I don't believe that. And I like to play, but I like to play seriously. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And and many architects, when they try to be funny, they usually do that. Then when they do kindergartens, for example, they think that it's funny. And they become infantile, you know, but it's like old people being infantile, you know, it's like grandpas, it's a bit pederastic actually, you know, it's like, so I don't like that. So, and then let's say the project didn't appear yet where the given program, etc., you know, because when you do competitions in the end, you also work without clients and you usually have program and you want to win them. So it's not that you are totally free of but it happens, you know, in the next steps. For example, in the concert hall, that is a super highly serious project, you know, 150 million euros budget, you know, a huge amount of super complex acoustic engineers, you know, like it's like he's like fucking us all the time. Every time we do something nice, he comes and no, you cannot do that, you know, and so. But we are starting now to do a rather interesting, let's see if we manage, but to work also around a very interesting color concept that could create maybe some of this, let's say, unseriousness or surprise where you look twice, you know? So for example, because the client is also rather conservative, so we are working on the seats now, okay, the seating. It's a firm from Barcelona, by the way. And we are thinking of making the back part in one color and actually seat in another, but you don't see it when it's closed. So when you go to your seat and you open the seat, then you get this bright orange, you know, it looks brown and serious. And then suddenly when you make it, it's like, you know, and then, so this kind of moments, this kind of subversity, we also try to incorporate, but clients are usually also scared of doing these things. You know, you have to find the right, as I said, you have to find the right conflict, like with the picnic space, so that it doesn't look like your idea almost. So if you find the right conflict to make it a common problem, and then you have the solution as a common solution, then you get good, you can do this kind of stupid things. If you try to superimpose them, it's usually hard to, because clients are also scared of being ridiculous or having to, you know, it's also tax money, and then someone's like, how can you waste it on something so stupid? I don't know. They have also a lot to risk. So you have to be very clever in these processes, and it's not always given. Yeah. So I think also it's very important to work with humor, and it's very important to be loose somehow. Even so, the organization is so important, but architecture is also a different animal, I must say. It's just a different animal. You know, in architecture, you usually spend much more time, for example. Well, not in a concert house, maybe, but if you are in a school, you are hours there. You don't want to have humor in a school, you know? I mean, look at the stupid teacher you have. I don't know. You know, maybe you wanna have a good environment to learn, etc. But humor is something to relax, to, you know, to, I don't know. Or maybe the way I applied it in Superkilen, also with the pink space, is like a momentum. But you also don't want the momentum to last too long. It's like a joke. You don't want to hear it twice or three times, you know. So when it comes to architecture, and let's say
it's permanence is
the permanence of it. You know, the permanence of being in a space, of living in a space. You don't want to be constantly confronted with a certain.
Unless it's a very good one. Unless it's a very good joke. I would like to. There is one last question that I would like that you answer quickly from Osvaldo. I don't know if you want to just switch on your camera and unmute to make the question yourself.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you for the question.
Osvaldo? Okay, so should I read the question then for you, Osvaldo? Sorry, isn't working. Okay, so Martin, you can also have a look at the chat. Osvaldo is actually asking to get a bit more, describe a bit more the whole idea of the aesthetics of conflict. This idea of conflict is associated, or it would seem to be, to the idea of the reintegrating elements or situations from different places. So I guess a bit more of, you know, like developing a bit on your idea of.
Well, again, yeah. I mean, again, I must say what I also answered before, and as I said that before as well. I think it has a lot to do also with context. You know, conflict in a certain place is a different story. You know, in Saudi Arabia, conflict is different than a conflict in Berlin or in Barcelona or in Madrid or in Argentina, wherever we are talking about. So there are very different places with very different contextual elements. However, I have the feeling that the planning professions, and maybe that was also the question about the humor before, the planning professions are being too much driven by order and systematification of things, you know? And the question if this is a right way to go, and if, you know, and this is the, let's say, the heritage of the Bauhaus, the heritage of the functionalism as the great god of architecture, you know? And we have to question if this is the right way to do buildings and develop cities. And I believe it's not. So we have to somehow work around the idea that these functionalities are incredibly important. And how to get them into projects, this is a hard story. But my strategy that is also consistent with my personality is to create a certain unpleasantness in situations, you know, that give people sometimes a certain ability to put things on the table sometimes. And that goes wrong sometimes it works out, you know. So, but, and also when it comes to projects, to let things also be in conflict, you know. Also the harmonization of buildings, the harmonization of things is not always necessary. you know. Sometimes dissonances, I don't know, a lot of these things can be so incredibly helpful and good for projects. But it's like in every composition, you know, it's like if it's a piece of music or whatever, it's what makes the music then, no? So otherwise it's a pop song or fast food, no? But if it becomes more interesting and more complex, it's usually also rather dissonant and special. So, and this is when I speak about the aesthetic of conflicts, is to allow this kind of also discourse about places. So how central is a place, for example? In which text about architecture have we read that a house is central, for example? You know, when we discuss, it never happens. Or it's social has been trendy, but to speak about this kind of, you know, when you enter a place, how do you feel about it? I don't know, this kind of, obviously that can be also rather personal, but still, I think the architecture has a very body, it's very body related, no? And so, but it's not being taught, you know, really. How do you feel about when you enter a space? You know, no one talks about architecture like that, or not too many people. So, and this is what I try to, when it comes to translation from landscape to architecture, I would say this is the conflict that I try to inject, and obviously with more or less success. And also we are starting. So the three projects we're working on: the concert hall, the foundation in Kuwait, and the school. All three of them are, to a certain extent, also careful projects, I would say, in which we didn't apply. You know, we're starting cooking, let's say. So it's a good scrambled egg. It's not yet a tortilla, okay? So it's still kind of beginnings, let's say. And I hope that on some point we get to Indian cooking, yeah? But not yet.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for your presentation and for trying to answer all the questions. Thank you also everybody for your participation. A big clap for Martin, and we hope we can see each other very soon in an Argentinian way here in Barcelona or somewhere in the world. And for everybody, have a good evening. You can be with us tomorrow. Wow, what a simultaneous screen here I have. Tomorrow we have an open day, an online open day, where you can join us for getting to know everything that we're doing at IAAC and our educational programs. Martin, once again, thanks for joining us. Thanks for not coming, as Willy was saying in the beginning. Willy, any last words from your side?
No. Gracias, Martín. Un placer haberte oído y haber escuchado y haber compartido estos proyectos. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Willy, muchas gracias. Adiós a todos, Bye bye. Thank you for having me.
Adiós, Martin. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.